I think it's hard to say. I think we do need more attention on the water sector. We need more research in that area, but we need it to be connected with other sectors as well, not split off into its own little silo.
Andrew, I'm going to now get more specific in each area. In energy, you talked about carbon neutrality, or at least moving that way. That was the focus of your talk. Is there any hope of doing that in the absence of carbon pricing and a quick enough time scale to address the problem?
I'd hate to eliminate hope, a bit like your death versus life conversation you just had earlier. I don't like that digital approach, but okay, I can go to no hope if you want. But I'm an optimist, as I said in the talk. Look, we will get to a price on carbon by hook or by crook. I mean, by default, many of us are operating with a price on carbon. Many of us in our sectors are basically bottom line focused to efficiency. So we at Dow are 38% less energy intensity since Kyoto. DuPont's got similar numbers. We have a next 10-year goal of 25% less energy intensity that hits our bottom line immediately. It's the obvious. So we have saved more carbon dioxide being emitted than, the state of California over that period of time. So we all do it for efficiency and bottom line reasons. So the obvious is there. You have to set a price on a scarce resource. If you're in an era of abundancy, okay, and it has no consequence, okay, we can get rich on, basically abundancy, and there's a value to abundancy. It's normally a low price. If it's artificial, if governments distort, if markets don't function, then last time I checked, that's the role of a government. I mean, and we don't like words like tax. Well, we have taxes on everything, for goodness sakes. We're one of the highest tax regimes in the world. So politicians have to have the courage of facing the scientific challenge of the time. So putting a price on carbon, whether it's a tax or a cap and trade mechanism, we all have ideas on how that should happen and how it should be bolted up. And the world has to come along. I happen to believe the US has to lead. I'm part of an American enterprise because I joined America, if you like, because America was the leader of the world for 100 years. I'd like to think that's a current tense topic. It will remain the leader. How do you lead? You basically take the issues of the planet and say, I've got to do something about them in my home country. And I have to have the political will to set a price on carbon that makes sense. I have to involve as many sectors as I can. I should do it such that I don't destroy my economy. This is, threading the eye of the needle, so to speak. Is it doable? I believe it is. We belong to US CAP down in DuPont, and we got pretty close to a manifesto that we gave to the politicians. The House passed something. It was okay, it wasn't great. The Senate threw up, and the administration got cold feet after health care. Sayonara to taking care of carbon emissions. Well, that's a 2-year cycle last time I checked. All of our talks talked about decade cycle. Your question you asked us a question in decades. What are we going to be in decades? So how do you bring long-term thinking to something like a price on a scarce resource, whether it be water or carbon? Okay, last time I checked, you need courageous leadership. So I think the public and private sector has to have a voice. The private sector, I think, most of us who believe in this are leading with our voices. And the public sector, the government has to come along. Realistically, it won't be in these next 2 years.
Well, I always use the word price and not tax, so that's
okay.
Maybe I can fool somebody. I don't know.
What the thing about the certainties in life, taxes and death. So you covered both.
So, Ellen, I have to ask the typical question on food, but I want to ask it as from your position of leadership. What's the biggest problem you see with genetically modified crops? And it doesn't have to be the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I guess I'm beyond worrying. I think when people are starving, they're willing to accept more, take more risks. So I'm not too worried about organisms overrunning the planet. But from the challenge of you developing crops and high yield production cycles for GM type materials, what's your greatest concern?
So first of all, let's put some context around it. There are more than 300 million acres today in 25 countries that are growing genetically modified seeds to produce higher yields and to really change the output of food in those areas. This has been I have never seen an area that's been more studied, that's been characterized in so many different ways, that has had so much regulatory scrutiny associated with it. And through all of that, all of the evidence shows that biotech products are safe, and they're safe for food, they're safe for livestock. Yet it becomes an emotional issue, because it becomes an issue of, well, you're doing something to me, it's not my choice. Well, I don't know about your lives, but my lives, a lot of stuff happens to me that's not my choice, but I mean, you know, the tax thing and, you know, all that kind of stuff that Andrew was just talking about. But on a serious note, I think there is a question. I mean, it's easy for us in Western and developed worlds that have an embarrassment of riches to hold up the rest of the world who doesn't from benefiting from increased productivity and benefiting from, you know, you can engineer seeds that have drought resistance, that utilize nitrogen much more efficiently. You can engineer seeds for healthier oils. You can engineer seeds not only from the input traits, as they're called, which benefit farmers, but over time for output traits to get very different types of, you know, of opportunities then to utilize them in a healthier and more nutritious food environment. So I do think the issues are one that there's no glaring reason for some countries, some Western countries like in Europe, to advocate for it. Some would suggest that if you got a good corn rootworm in Europe, that they'd have them basically approved in record time. There's you know, so there's a lot of differences between the food system in the U.S. where the traits have had a very huge impact on yield. And very beneficial to the output and in other areas of the world. I do think this is an area, though, if you're going to feed 9 billion people, we're going to have to use scientific frameworks. We're going to have to use them very, you know, religiously around the world to really understand. It is. I mean, I've had these long discussions with heads of state in Africa and India, in areas around the world, around not making an emotional decision, but making a decision weighing the evidence. And there is, as I've said, I have not seen an area that has been more studied, more regulated, more scrutinized, and at the end of the day has seen no evidence that there is a negative impact to either food or to livestock.
So it sounds like it's an issue of education, as usual.
Can I add an anecdote?
Yes.
Some years ago, there was an FDA committee in which I participated to determine the safety of a tomato that had been genetically altered so that a tiny bit of the DNA was removed, just a tiny bit, that altered the enzyme so that it would ripen naturally and slowly on the way to market. Now, the practice at the time and today is that classical breeding has been done to produce a very hard, kind of a golf ball type tomato that then is brought to the market and sprayed with chemicals to rapid ripen. I could never understand why, and I think it's because of education, that the preference would be for the golf ball that's sprayed versus that which is naturally ripening because of a minor genetic modification. So I think it's clear that education and an understanding of what the power of genetics, molecular genetics and genetic engineering can do. I think the problem is calling it genetic engineering because we've been engineering plants for thousands of years by classical techniques of selection. So again, it's terminology and education.